It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And today we are talking about the Downhounds. Okay, we're just going to start over.
And today we're talking about the Dawnhounds.
By Sasha Stronach. Would you like to do the plot or shall I?
Why don't you? Because I'm forgetting everybody's names right now.
All right. In the far, far ecopunk future, I don't know if there's another name for it, but it's like cyberpunk, except most of the technology...
Biopunk, I think.
Myopunk?
Biopunk.
Biopunk, yeah, no, that makes sense. Mycopunk would also make sense, but biopunk
Vegapunk.
Future, yep. Where it's like cyberpunk with, cool nanotech style stuff and, body modifications and all that, but it's all plants. That's the new technology. Our hero is a cop. She is walking the beat with her wiser elder partner when they witness a ship being shot to pieces, they assume, out in the dock, covered by a mysterious fog. But she doesn't really get a chance to investigate this because she is soon embroiled in a gang of queer wizard pirates because she herself is bisexual. And this leads her to learn about a conflict in the heavens, which is also raging upon the earth. And a lot of terrible stuff happens to the city. And eventually she survives. Is that a spoiler? She lives. Is that
yeah,
that
sure. See, what I would say something like a tired cop who's just been demoted for being bisexual in a very heteronormative society has a near-death or possibly not so near death experience and finds herself tangled up with queer wizard pirates and also gods that are largely based on the Chinese zodiac. And then, agreeing with you, a lot of horrible stuff happens. And indeed, she, again, survives is a complicated thing, but...
Yes. All right. Cool. Are there lesbians in this book?
I mean, there are both lesbians and also our main character, while she is technically bisexual, is pretty much only ever seems particularly attracted to women.
Yes, although she says repeatedly that she is
She says repeatedly that she's bisexual.
The major thing in the book is her being attracted to women, or a woman.
And a woman, but also the major, you never actually see her being attracted to men. You see her musing on her hypothetical attraction to men. But you never see her have any sort of physical or romantic attraction to men.
It's very convenient in the society that she should identify as bisexual because the implication is that is what kept her from being executed or brainwashed and was just simply demoted, was that she could theoretically be attracted to men.
Yes.
So, but yeah, close enough, I would say. And wizards, there's a whole bunch of them. Wizards abound.
Oh, there's a lot of wizards.
Yeah, a lot of wizarding going on in this book, and they do fight or are the lesbians.
Yes, you have wizards, lesbians, and wizard lesbians. Actually, I think all of the lesbians are also wizards. But there's also other wizards that they're fighting.
Yes, and there may be non-wizard lesbians, but it's part of the conceit of this book that you're more likely to become a wizard if you happen to be a lesbian.
Yes.
Why should you read this book?
We should also say that this is very much set in a far future New Zealand. So first of all, if you want to read something that's, that uses very Kiwi inflected English and things like that, and is very much rooted in New Zealand, despite the fact that it's not located in a world where anyone even remembers New Zealand, then that could be appealing to you. I would say that there's some fascinating, I'm not going to say good world building, but there's some fascinating imagery that's sort of running through this world. And I really do want to give it credit for moving beyond the everything is a one-on-one mapping of contemporary countries and cultures.
Yeah, I would say that like it's far enough in the future that you can't just map it onto one particular, nation or one particular thing, but there are remnants of Kiwi language in there. And the other reason that you can tell that this is set in New Zealand and written by a New Zealander is that I don't think there's any other way that they would have gotten a cover quote from Tasman Muir.
Yeah, it did get blurred by Tasman Muir. Also, I mean,
sorry, Tamsin.
And I mean, this is also Tamsin. Yeah, it's also particularly because the author is definitely not a Homestuck. But clearly has Homestuck friends.
See, I didn't say that. That's not my fault this time.
I know. Well, but did you catch the thing? I know. But I knew this was going to be on me because I felt like we needed to mention this. You did catch the thing in the acknowledgments, right?
No, of course. Audiobooks don't get acknowledgments.
They're really letting you down here. I'm gonna have to pull it up. It says when he's thanking his publicist and agent Dave, and he says, "Dave, you're my monorail. I still don't understand Homestuck, but I think Dave is my monorail."
Right. Moving swiftly on. So
anyway,
yes.
There's actual reasons to read this book other than the whole Kiwi thing. There's a lot of really bizarre but great visual imagery. There's, a lot of sort of interesting body horror. And I feel like the second half of the novel is actually pretty fun.
Oh, no, I would say the opposite.
But
we'll get to it.
See,
I would say
there's a massive tonal shift right in the middle, and I think whether you wanted something that's sort of grim and dark and tired, or whether you want something that's sort of a somewhat generic but fairly competent action with a little bit of comedy and a kiss, is really that's going to depend on whether you liked the first half or the second half more.
Yeah, with you on that one. But okay, so my why should you read this would be if you liked Master of Jin, but want something that has better politics.
Yes,
but is
much more skeptical about law enforcement.
Yes, is much better, has better politics, but is like less well executed in pretty much every other respect. This one's for you. It was not for me. Why shouldn't you read this book?
I'm not entirely sure that I would say is less well executed in every way. I think that this one is in general more interesting than Master of Jin, which is.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that.
Which
but
is thoroughly
being interesting
competent,
is not the same thing as being well executed. Competent. Maybe that's what I should have said. It's less competent than Master of Jin.
That's fair.
But it does many of the same sort of out of the textbook plotting things. Also.
It does. It just is much
has
more willing to cheerfully go off the rails.
Stuff going on. Exactly.
Why shouldn't you read this book? Well, we've kind of given you a good idea of some of the reasons you shouldn't read this book. It's kind of a mess. The first half is, and sort of the opposite of why you should read this book. The first half is sort of tired and cynical, and probably in many ways more interesting, but kind of plotting. And the second half is a little bit of a generic action comedy romance. That suddenly gets a lot quippier.
Yeah, I should point out that the mass murder happens in the second half because that's what we get out of our action comedies these days. Back in the day in your frivolous action movie, if the villain threatened to blow up the world, the hero would stop him. is, it's a plot beat. You can wipe out a city or two and still quip your way through it. I wonder what changed.
Yep.
But yes.
Yeah, it suddenly gets a lot quippier. And, Kit is charming, and if you're into that sort of thing, but also is very sort of generic paint by numbers in terms of its execution, and is also kind of a mess.
Yes. I think that if you are more of my stripe, you might be lulled by the first half into thinking that you might like this book, and then the second half is going to punish you relentlessly. So there's that.
You know what? This honestly, well, we can wait till the spoiler zone, but this pacing is very much the pacing of a 26 episode anime series.
That's a good shout. Yeah, I would go with you on that one. So, content warnings. Body horror in big letters.
So much body horror.
Sexism, homophobia, institutional sexism and homophobia, brainwashing, like slavery,
so much
essentially.
Brainwashing, slavery.
Colonial, all sorts of, evil colonial stuff. Pretty much, yeah. Anything that I'm missing there?
The usual mix, but minus sexual violence.
Yeah, there isn't much in the way of rape in this book. In fact,
or even
I don't think there's even the threat of
rape.
rape. Yeah. Also,
with the possible exception, they may have mentioned using the zombified prisoners, which would count as rape. But
also kind of weirdly, this is one of those books which picks the issue that it wants to focus on. So there's also no racism in this book, which is weird.
Which is definitely weird because this is a multiracial dystopian society.
Exactly.
But you know what? Sometimes you can have a multiracial dystopian society in which race is less of a factor because they're too busy focusing on other things.
True. Just, rarely, if given the opportunity to oppress people. But anyway.
Yes.
So, does that cover all of it?
Probably not, but
yeah, I'm sure that we'll come up with stuff as we go on. We forgot to mention, here's another book that thinks all cops are bastards, but thinks organized crime is pretty great. We've got a pirate crew that does only good things, not so much the pillage and rape. Yes, let us continue to the spoiler zone.
Yes.
Right now. Here.
It's like I was saying.
I'm going to the spoiler zone.
The thing that makes us feel like a 26 episode anime is that it does the thing where it starts out being like mysterious and weird and interesting, but also kind of slow because they're trying to stretch it out. And then suddenly it reaches the point where it's running out of season. And so everything is sort of packed into the end. Yeah. Everything is just sort of stuffed into the end. And it wraps up like weirdly neatly. But with still your hook for the next season.
Yeah, no, this is definitely one of those books that's written with the larger series in mind, which is possibly why it's so overstuffed with exposition. Because there's a lot of stuff that it wants to establish, and it feels like there are some characters that were brought on board just so that they could be relevant, like later. In a book that isn't this one, like the dancer, for example, who Tack encounters. Tack, is that her name?
No, Yat, I think.
Yat, sorry, I was thinking of the girl from Invader Zim. Yat, who. She goes to the queer club and sees this dancer on stage who sings the song that she and her old flame had together, which is an aria from some ancient opera or other, God knows. They go back. She meets her backstage and they almost make out, but don't. I assume that dancer is going to be relevant later.
The dancer is her girlfriend.
Oh, is that?
They're all the same woman.
Oh,
That's
that's
why
it.
it's the red-haired woman who can sing. Yeah, as far as I can tell, there's only actually one redhead in this entire society, and it's her ex.
Okay, that makes much. Well, the dancer gets a like a little bit in the epilogue later on, and she's not the same person in the
The
epilogue.
dance. No, this is the singer who she made. The person she has sex with, I thought was the singer.
Yeah, that's what I meant. The singer. I'm sorry, not the dancer.
Um, and I don't think the singer isn't in the. Is the singer in the epilogue?
Yeah, she is. You may note that we're having a hard time remembering everything that happened in this book because so much happens in this book. This book is both like uniquely there are plot points that I genuinely don't understand from this book. Like I think I would need to read it again and like really pay attention to understand certain things. Like I don't know why the immortal witch woman, wizard, lesbian lady was so mad at Yacht when the ship came back to the city. Like I don't know why she blamed her for the disaster because she didn't know yet that she had killed this guy's brother, which is the only reason that I could think of that she would blame him for that.
I think it's specifically that the ship got brought back into a place where it was, where it could not actually hold a ship, and that was because of Yacht's magic.
Oh, the idea was that Yacht summoned the ship?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, no, I don't, but that doesn't that didn't cause the apocalypse to happen. The apocalypse was already happening, and that was what what's her name was blaming Yacht for. Was she blaming her for not entrusting the corrupt cop to fix it all by himself? Because he would have done a better job?
I think she was blaming her for sort of. Honestly, I think she was mostly blaming her for being somebody in whom she saw a younger version of herself.
Yeah, but she showed her the whole city
of
full of dead people and was like, "This is all your fault." And I was like, "Why?" What? I mean, it's kind of like the moment to moment stuff is a little bit hard to follow here. But that's fine. Like that's actually not one of my complaints, honestly, because I think that like in terms of like being a fun mess, there's a lot to enjoy about it, and like I think incidentally, by the way, this book has one of the worst covers I've ever seen.
Yeah, like it has it.
Like these neat totally little mushroom jarring. Houses with windows in them, like that's not even remotely what the vibe of this book is. People do live in
weird bio houses, but yes, no, the cover is so completely off the vibe of this book. Both vibes, because this really is kind of two books grafted together.
Yeah, but the book seems like a cover of sort of a YA novel from the 90s, almost YASF novel from the 90s. It was very strange. But that aside, like I think that you're right in that the strongest thing about this book is the whole bio eco whatever punk idea and the visuals that come with that. The cities the houses that breathe and live off the skin flakes and exhalations of their tenants and die slowly when they're vacant. I like that both as a metaphor and as just a concept. I think that's great.
And I really like that this is a biopunk world where there's still tons of metal around because metal sticks around.
Yeah, and then like the idea, I really liked the idea that the reason that this transformation has happened so quickly is explicitly not just because this is better technology, because it kind of is but kind of isn't, and there are definitely places where it would be much simpler just to use something made of metal.
Right, but but there's like politics around.
Right, exactly. It's sort of the revolutionary thing, and also you have to making it sort of politically necessary to buy all of this new tech to jumpstart the economy of your newly revolved society. Actually, what that is a thing that I can praise this book for. Its grasp of politics is significantly above average, I think.
Right. Right. No, it's funny because the world building. It's not exactly world building because there's a lot of exposition. There's not actually there's not a hugely fleshed out sense of the world, partly because it's really inside its characters' heads and its characters aren't that interested in the wider world. Like, we still don't actually know what the language that the people in the North speak, because everyone's like, I don't know, it's Northern or something.
Well, we learn later that it's probably Norwegian, but that's in the last chapter, which is jarring in a number of different ways. It's also the only place where,
the second to last chapter, the very last chapter is the, to be continued.
That's the one I'm talking about, where he wakes up in Norway.
Oh, that's right. You're right. He wakes up in Norway, and there's the
that's the Northern Lands. It's where the white people are in Norway, with their robots and
it's
phone
extremely. Tanks. Yes, that's right. Because or possibly Sweden. Or possibly Iceland. Could also be Iceland.
Scandinavia.
Scandinavia.
Somebody's going to
because there's Sven's daughter.
Yes. Iceland.
Yes, that's right. I forgot. Oh, that's right. No, actually, you must be. I think you are right. Because there's Norlink. But whether that's Nor for North or Nor for Norway, we don't know.
It's the sort of thing that Norwegians would do, certainly.
I thought of another content warning, by the way, to stick in there.
Which
is parrot death.
I have a long list of things to talk about when we get to the grumpy zone, and I want to... and the sheer amount of bird libel in this book is something that I want to get to there. But we'll put a pin in that for the time being, because I still want to point out what is good about this book, because actually, sewn into what I've been praising are a few bad things, such as the fact that a lot of the stuff that the book puts down doesn't actually make sense if you think about it for 5 seconds. But we'll get to that later.
So, another thing that I like.
Yes.
Is I actually enjoy the way that the magic works. I like that. Nobody quite understands it because it's actually magic. Like, you have this technology stuff, but you've also got this magic, and the magic is weird. I liked how weird the magic is, and I liked that it was a fairly convincing immortality that kind of... It does a good job of being like, yes, there's immortality, but it kind of sucks.
Yeah, you die and you come back, but every time you die and you come back, there's a little bit less of you, or there are more holes where the wind can blow through. Good, I like that. It's sort of like it's part of the sort of broader trauma. There's a lot of trauma in this book, but sort of the broader trauma metaphor where it hones you in a certain way, but it also eventually evaporates your brain. Maybe a little bit too much emphasis on the whole honing part, but there's a sort of there's an underlying thematic thing in here where it's like being queer, being different, being
mostly being queer,
but there's
like pretty much everyone, as far as I can tell, who can use magic on the pirate ship is some kind of queer.
Yep. But
and
I'm being
it
charitable
very leans
here.
into this. Yes. I mean, it's not... Well, the thing is, it never states flat out that you have to be queer. It states that basically being an outcast makes the gods more interested in, giving you save states.
I mean, this is a big honkin' Queer Desires, the Revolutionary Moment book.
Yes.
And with no extra... finesse on it at all. And but yeah, no, it is explicitly stated that, it's sort of being an outsider or, basically just suffering, being like, I feel like the origin story that we get for, I keep forgetting her name because her name just slips out of my brain. Do you remember it?
Yat?
No, the witch woman's name.
Oh, CD?
CD, thank you. Her origin story is like, it doesn't matter at that point that she was gay, just that she was, the daughter of the weird witch woman. So like a line is drawn between, sort of medieval burn the witch, enclave shit and modern religious homophobia. And like, also it's very clear that it matters more to the bird people that they're missing that they're losing elections than it does that that they hate gay people. It's just that hating gay people is a fine.
But note as far as bird libel goes that our lesbian pirate captain and her wife are also like also bird magic people.
Yeah, and like once again, I mean, this is also better than
not birds are not inherently bad in this.
No, they are not. And yeah, it does feel bad about killing that parrot. But
she does.
But answer me this: how the fuck does a parrot with 4 wings fly? Where do you put the extra 2 wings? May I ask? How is that a functional animal afterwards? But
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Don't dragonflies have 4 wings?
Yes, because they are the only animals that have like ball joints where they can rotate around each other. It's like a helicopter. That's not how bird wings work. Although the image of a bird with 4 wings flying around like a dragonfly or a helicopter is pretty cool. Maybe that's how they work. I wish that he'd
helicopter cockapoo.
Helicopter cockapoo, flying through the sky so fancy free. Terror of the skies, don't drop on me with your enormous body. I wish that the author had thought about this enough to put that detail in.
This is how someone decided to save the cockapoo. Was like gene splicing them on weird helicopter wings.
See, I mean, this is sort of one of my problems with this book is that it's like there's a lot of really good creative world building, but none of it is thought through just that extra bit enough. It's like it puts out a good idea or a good image, and then it doesn't but then like my mind at least snags on it, and it's like, wait a minute, it's like, why do these far future tech Norwegians have rail with an electrified third rail, which wasn't a good idea in the first place and will absolutely be extinct in another 100 years. I was completely wrong about my third rail criticism. I heard something on a podcast and I have understood it. It's perfectly acceptable technology for a subway, and of course they wouldn't rip it out and change it. That would require investment in infrastructure, and that's way less likely than just keeping it around.
I assume that this is like the ancient ruins of their society that's being kept alive only by
because the robots and the AI are part of the infrastructure of the subway.
Yeah, but also, to be fair, just because something is a bad idea doesn't mean that it doesn't prove extremely durable in urban design.
This is, I understand this, but this is also just like...
Mostly, I admit I kind of liked that because I like the idea of somebody who, because he died on the subway tracks, is just eternally reincarnated on the subway tracks, and half the time he rolls the wrong way and electrocutes himself on the third rail and has to be reborn again.
It's funny. I'll give it that.
It's funny.
This is part of the issue with the two halves of the book and how they sort of tickle each other is that the main reason why I compare this to Master of Jin at the beginning is because if Master of Jin was doing a Pratchett, this is really doing a Pratchett. Pratchett hangs over this one.
That is true.
To the point where within the first there's the prologue chapter with the guy on the boat, right? But in the second chapter, when we're introduced to our actual main characters, we get the preceding policeman's walk in the first paragraph, and then the bad part of the city
making
is the
fun
shambles.
of it.
So in Discworld, it's the shades, not the shambles, but Wellington isn't quite London either. Yeah.
Making fun of the preceding policeman's walk.
I mean, yes, but in the same way that it's made fun of in Pratchett, right? It's like people who don't know how efficient it is make fun of it.
No, this is also just because your viewpoint character is somebody who realizes that it's efficient, but still thinks it looks stupid. Yeah. This is, I agree with you that Pratchett hangs over all of this, but it does feel like it is engaging with Pratchett, not just regurgitating.
Oh yeah, which is again
novel.
One of the things that it has over Clark, which is that it definitely wants to talk about the weirdness of some of the political stuff in Discworld.
Right, including the fact that Discworld, which you and I both love,
it's really pro cop.
Essentially the most popular series of Discworld, and the one that everybody seems to remember and talk about, sniff sniff the witches, not the witches, is the one that is kind of pro-cop and that has a lot of like weird jokes about police brutality.
Yeah, pro-cop and pro-dictator, if it comes to that.
Yes. And, extremely pro-dictator.
Yeah.
One of the, happy endings, the climax of one of the books is Veterinary reminding everybody that he is in fact a tyrant and gets to just nationalize the telecommunications industry.
Indeed. But yeah, it's the sort of the same problem that happens with this book happens with, or that happened with The Master of Jen happens with this book, though, which is that Pratchett managed to pull off that funny to serious gradient in the same book. Really, like, that was, I think, perhaps one of his main superpowers, is that he could go from funny to deep and funny to deep without it being jarring.
Not just funny, but like deeply silly.
Tragic.
Right. And silly, and extremely so silly that you're kind of rolling your eyes to, like, from that to being deeply meaningful, and you're suddenly your eyes are welling up with tears. Like that was definitely Pratchett at the height of his powers. But like, this is a first-time author, and if you if you
compare this to Pratchett's first novels, then this is like, this will beat the shit out of this. Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know. I came away from Master of Jin going, this is competent, and I rather enjoyed it, but I'm not like excited about it. And maybe it's just that, maybe it is just that I have more affection for the ones that are messy in various ways. But like, I'm much more interested in seeing what this author does next than I am in, seeing what P. Djeli Clark does next, even though, again, I actually totally enjoyed reading A Master of Jen.
Yeah. I think Master of Jen is actually funnier also.
Yes.
Which is unfortunate. But there are... Can I, go off on my rant about what I actually really didn't like about this book at this point?
Let's go to the grumpy zone.
To the grumpy zone we go. We're going out to the grumpy zone because there's quite a lot to complain about. So my major problem with this book, is not the plot, which, I mean, if you want to talk funny jokes, the idea that this book takes so long to get to the fireworks factory, and the climax is at a literal fireworks factory. That's a good joke. I appreciated that. But you're kind of lampshading your own problems there.
Yes.
Also very nice of them to set up the fireworks show with staged fuses and, time going off and everything. That was a good choice on the part of the evil cops. But the major problem with this book is that the characters speak in 40% exposition, 40% aphorisms, and 20% quips. And it's really, even the fact that it's like, okay, the exposition, sure, you're setting up in a really complicated universe that you're going to set an entire series of books in, and you want to get it all set out. That's fine. It's not good, but I can forgive it. And this is the thing that really felt like Terry Pratchett to me, is that all of the characters just have wise sayings, either their own wise sayings, or my father once said, or just I'm thinking about this in terms of a really, just sort of an insight into the world in a nutshell. And they're not great. Some of them don't even make sense. The thing that she learned one of the ones that I wrote down is this aphorism from her father: if you have the time, get the data. If you don't, make some. Make the time, make the data.
Or make the data.
I don't know. Isn't that part of it? Anyway, fake the data? Is that supposed to be a good idea?
Well, I guess you could read this as one of two ways. One is that data is so important that if you don't have the time to get the data, you need to make the time to get the data. Or the other one is data is so unimportant that, it's great if you can get it, but if not, you can just fabricate some numbers.
That's the best kind of saying, one that can mean two completely contradictory things at once. It's a good dad saying, I'll give it that. But like, this is sort of this is kind of the issue with reading this. And like,
true. And it really felt like the real downside to this is that the world is great, but I think honestly part of why the second half feels less interesting is because in the first half there's still this idea that maybe these characters will turn into people, and they never really do turn into people. There's never really a lot of the closest I can think of to a sort of a genuine human moment is when Yat's senior partner is like worrying about her inability to get money, and so tries to like sort of foists her off on the corrupt cop. Like that was, to me, that felt like a human moment of, I don't know what's going on, and so I'm incompetently trying to help you. And it never moves past that. Like, I don't feel like any of these characters really got fully developed as people, or like, and thus we didn't really have any good character relationships that felt really strong to me.
Right. And so like, and that becomes a particular problem when your big dramatic moment crux happy ending thing is power of lesbian, big kiss to save the world, and
right.
like literally we have kept this entire relationship off screen because this person has been hiding her identity this entire time for reasons.
Yeah, I mean, and particularly because, again, I am still pretty sure that the singer was her. It's hard to tell because when they're doing their like quasi epilogue exposition stuff, there's the thing where she talks about wearing a mask, and I can't tell if and the singer was wearing a mask, so I can't tell if she's being literal or being metaphorical here, or both.
It's true. And it's like,
but I think she's the singer because I think there's only one redhead in this book.
I could very easily have become confused. But I'm willing to accept that because there was much in this book that I found confusing. But regardless, like it seems almost to have sort of put extra weight on the fact that it couldn't write romance by just hiding that. We're not going to see any development of this romance because it's all going to happen in her memory right up until they mind meld and that fixes it.
I mean, there is the like climbing race, which in retrospect you can sort of see as working towards towards this idea of them having a relationship. But unfortunately, they didn't. It would have worked a lot better if there'd been some sort of chemistry between some frisson, exactly. Like, you could definitely have made this you could have added a lot more sexual tension to this climbing race.
The easiest thing in the world, to make a climbing race lesbian. Come on, man. Like, this combat lesbians is fucking page one. Page one of the lesbian romance handbook. You make your two protagonists fight, ideally with swords. But the mass climbing contest would have worked if you'd bothered to put in even the slightest bit of romantic tension. Page 2 of the lesbian romance handbook is more of a Queen Anne situation. A lady's maid undoes a million tiny little buttons. On page 3, the two meld minds. On page 4, they kill your dad.
Right, and there is no frisson.
Yes, and I don't know if this author is capable of frisson, which is a problem when love is the fifth element MacGuffin plot point.
Yes.
Second thing, because that was thing one. That was big complaint number one. Big complaint number two. This felt like a Wizards versus Lesbians greatest hits. Like it's very striking, but I think that I've seen almost every trick that is played in this book in other books that we've read for this podcast, and that's going to be
it's true. This so many of these things remind me of so many other things. Like there's we keep talking about Master Jin. There's definitely some of the Unbroken in here.
Definitely. The I think that the spores and the spore monsters owe a lot to Nine Fox. I think that actual weapon was used in Nine Fox. Like there were definitely spore-based weapons and like flesh merging weapons in Nine Fox Gambit. Like I'm sure that this is just a coincidence, but hey, there's a comic called Crow Killers about a group of patriarchal cultists who wear bird masks. I know it's probably all going back to Plague Doctor imagery.
I think it's all going. Yeah, I think this is a shared ancestry thing, not a derivatives thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't understand, if you don't read Homestuck, you're not going to be reading Crow Killers. But, yeah, but yeah, you're right. It's like basically like there's pretty much every like interesting thing I could see elsewhere. There was like, and the whole book felt an awful lot like, and you know, this is on me for not even remembering what this book was called, but the one where there's the master of you know, magical kids that kidnaps them all at a young age, and so the pirates have to go, you know, that's sort of the lesbian rat monster whose or you know, whose powers vary tremendously depending upon what's useful for the plot at any given point, which is another problem that this book has, is that Yacht can do whatever the plot requires that she can do at any given moment.
Are you talking about Green?
No, I'm not talking about Green. I'm talking,
which also has kidnapping kids and the lesbian master with
no.
powers.
It's the one that I thought was written by the same guy who wrote Foundry Side because it felt so derivative of Foundry Side. It's official. We've read too many books. I've become jaded. Only the most decadent thrills will awake my sleeping palate. Give me weird doll fetish bullshit. Give me racially problematic novels from the 70s. Bury your gaze. I'm just so bored.
But it was actually written by that's the one. It was Among Thieves, the one that got
Among
recommended
Thieves.
to
Yeah.
us.
Now this book there's a lot, and like Among Thieves is better at people and relationships than this book is, but they have a lot of plot problems in common.
Yes, Among Thieves has a lot of plotting issues, and has less like cool imagery than this one, but did have much better characterization.
Yeah.
The characters were fairly thin, but I still got, you know, fairly invested in their romances and things like that.
Exactly. And the romances were problematized also, which, you know, is useful. Right. Next thing. Complaint number 3. The politics gets kind of weird at the end, because I'm pretty sure that that the idea is like, first of all, like one thing that I love, that I actually appreciate about Terry Pratchett, is that eventually he stopped doing the whole "get out of my city, my city, my city" thing, and you know, somebody finally asks Vimes, you know, what the fuck? Why is this your city? How come you get to claim this city? This book, you know, just sort of goes all in.
I don't know. Vimes. I mean, Vimes is like inner policeman. Becomes peaks and thud and stays a presence throughout the rest of the
Sure. But we're maybe
this is not
we should do a
actually a
Discworld
podcast
bonus
about...
episode at some point, but maybe we should when we get so sick of Wizards vs. Lesbians books that we can't do this anymore, maybe we can do a Discworld podcast. But but the sort of like, okay, this giant terrorist attack is a false flag operation, and also we're going to do zombie tropes now.
You're right. It took this weird twist into what felt like much more sort of weird, like Q conspiratorial thinking.
Yeah, and like that sort of corresponded with the sort of action movie second half of the book thing happening where like everything got a lot dumber all of a sudden, I thought.
But the pacing picked up. The first
Yes,
half is more
there was
interesting,
that.
the first half is more interesting, but it really does plod.
Yeah, I mean, for once, I preferred the plotting, sort of marinating in misery part to the actiony part in this one. But yeah, so those are my three. Oh, and also like what the Crane God's madness is supposed to be. It's like there, it's like doing two different. Well, it's almost like the priesthood of the Crane God are all hypocrites, but it's like, okay, so the god is like invested in the cycle of life and death, but also it wants to burn everything and start over, which is like the exact opposite of what the cycle. Like the villains' motivations were very like action movie. Oh, he's a madman. That's why he's doing it. Kind of like I
Well, but, I
didn't.
mean, part of this is I feel like part of what's going on is that the Crane priesthood is one kind of bad guy, and then Zhao, who's also like a Crane weaver, and works with the Crane priesthood, but like you can see the tension between Zhao and the Crane priesthood, where like one of these is this sort of entrenched bureaucratic oppressive power, and the other is the sort of madman who is also a special agent they have to deal with. That honestly works fairly well incidentally with politics, because to me it definitely felt like the Republican Party versus like the QAnon people.
Yeah, I could get behind that.
I mean, I know it's weird to be reading American politics into this extremely Kiwi book, but I feel like to some degree that contrast is something that the world right now is struggling with. The rise of the far right is very much about this sort of weird, uncomfortable alliance between the fairly entrenched, oppressive powers, everyday powers, and the increasingly terrifying madmen who are trying to lead populist revolts.
Yeah, agreed. Um, Oh, speaking, I mean, since we're talking about this is a very Kiwi book, I felt like uh, it's interesting that this comes out of post-lockdown New Zealand, where the extent and the sort of class elements of the lockdown were a really big hot topic, and then in this book it turns out that the disease was engineered by the powerful to depopulate the poor.
Yeah, well, and that's definitely a little weird, given the um, given the Chineseness of the gods. Monkey
Yeah,
flat out speaks Mandarin just a couple sentences, and then he repeats himself in English. So it's not like you're missing out on anything. But
it is interesting that the Chinese gods are, in particular, are real, and the other gods are kind of that people worship are sort of dismissed as afterthoughts. Um,
or
God,
possibly, I don't know. It's possible that the other gods are supposed to actually be the weavers, like are supposed to be some of these ancient people who died so many times that they lost their humanity.
yeah, that makes sense.
I kind of wondered if because there's all this weird stuff around like the goddess of thieves in particular, and I kind of wonder if she's supposed to be our lesbian pirate captain, in like a
Maybe.
previous phase of her life. It's left ambiguous, but like there's also a thing where the Chinese gods are not actual Chinese gods that you will find in a Taoist temple, except for Monkey, I guess.
Yeah.
But the Chinese gods are based in Chinese culture to a very attenuated extent. And the other
Where does the
gods,
crane fit into all of this?
I mean, honestly, most of these gods are martial arts or like movie martial arts styles.
Yeah. I mean, and
This
that's
is why I
made
said
explicit
based in
where
Chinese
the other
culture to
cop
an attenuated.
learned his martial arts from a monkey god pamphlet, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're there are all sorts of martial arts based new religious movements. But but still the thing is that these are clearly rooted in some long ago idea of Chinese culture, and the other gods don't seem like that. There's no. It's a little bit weird to me that there's the only thing that survived is there's no like religious continuity really to old religions, but there are real gods, but they're like animals from Chinese imagery.
Yep. I mean, I guess I mean, honestly, I could forgive that because one of the cool things about this book is that it sort of it it deals with culture over a very long period of time, not being like a tradition that is passed down in secret and becomes like attenuated and weird, but it's still basically the same thing that it is. It's more like, oh, we held on to this slang because we like this slang, and we held on to this and that scrap, but all of the nationalities and peoples that birthed these ideas are so long forgotten at this point, and the record is so destroyed that all we have left is this sort of cultural ephemera, and that works for me.
Yeah, that's fair. That's
how
fair.
that works with the pantheon, whether this is like a pantheon that is created by faith, that's another question. Like how far in the future we are exactly, since these people are millennia old, and one of the millennia old guys died on a subway platform. That's another question.
He's many millennia old.
Yeah, so this is the far, far, far future.
Yeah, and that's fair. We're talking about so far. We're talking about sufficiently far in the future that that I think if you look at we're talking like 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, at least.
And it's like
so.
God knows what we currently have from 3, 4, 5,000 years ago.
I mean, honestly, a surprising amount in places
Besides,
where we've been able to recover texts.
A rude letter about the quality of your copper ingots.
Right. Well, we've got inscriptions and things like that, but.
Indeed. Can I just the narrator of the audiobook, very good job with various New Zealand accents. Like the narrator used more sort of Maori or more white people variations of New Zealand accents.
That's good.
But it did leave me slightly confused because I thought that there was a god named Dith, and it was only a little while later that I realized that that's just death. That's how Kiwis pronounce death.
Well, that's on you. That not
is on
the
me.
audiobook.
Yes, but I mean, I was sharing that because I thought it was funny.
It is funny.
Not as a criticism.
So.
Yeah, but anyway, I cringed my entire balls off at the kiss with the fireworks going off, and I can imagine under other circumstances being like wee silly fun, but it had lost me so completely by that point that I was just like, give me all of your breaks and go away, please. See,
at that point, I definitely felt like I felt like I was watching an anime again.
Yeah.
And so I was the thing where it's like, well, this is going completely off the rails, but I'm going to sort of enjoy the cinematic beats of this and turn my brain off. And then I'll turn my brain back on later to discuss it for the podcast. So, I think that if you just, the part of the problem with this book is kind of actually the same problem that I had with, wow, I'm just not remembering names at all today.
We've read too many books.
We've read so many books. The one that you really liked, and Light from Uncommon Stars.
Yes.
I feel like to some degree this is a little bit similar to some of the issues with Light from Uncommon Stars, except in reverse, where it's setting expectations and then it's giving you a completely different book.
Yeah.
I mean, with Light from Uncommon Stars, it's in some ways more interesting because it keeps switching back and forth. You're flipping between these different modes. And with this, it really, it it isn't quite as stark as like a line through the first half and second half. It sort of slowly slides into sort of mindless fun, tropey fun. But I think that some of the problem is that when you set up people to expect one kind of book and it delivers something different, it's harder to appreciate, or just get into the other thing. And I think part of what helped me with this book is that I got a little depressed by the first half and took a week off and then came back and backtracked a few chapters just to remind myself what was going on. Actually, come to think of it, I started again from the beginning, but I'd taken a week off. So I sort of zoomed through the first half, and then read the second half. And so I wasn't really expecting, I was reading, it really felt more, it was easier for me to just read it as two books.
Yeah. I think that's, I think that's a thing. I mean, I personally think that, for me at least, Uncommon Stars set itself up as there was going to be Gonzo Nutsoid from almost the very beginning. Not quite the very beginning, I'll admit, but almost the very beginning. And then proceeded to deliver on that. But
it definitely set itself up for being Nutsoid, but
that feeling when I say a phrase I regret, and then Alexis repeats it.
It was two books grafted together, and I was perfectly okay with there being like the sort of serious, the much more sort of serious, realistic one, and the much more Gonzo Nutsoid one.
Twice.
And the problem was that the streams started to cross in weird ways. And particularly, there was supposed to be all these serious issues in the Gonzo half, and I didn't feel like they could. It didn't end up, as we discussed extensively, it didn't end up ringing emotionally true to me because it felt like that was not able to deliver on the issues it was engaging with in those sections.
Now I get what you're saying, and that is the sort of thing where it's like, for me at least, if a book is, and we've said, it's not bad necessarily to mix like light and heavy material in the same book.
Right.
It's, possible to do that in a way which works really well. It's possible to do that in a way which is just sort of overwhelmingly stupid and entertaining. For example, episode 50, we'll talk about a work that does that.
Yes.
But, if it's one of those things where it's like a high tariff maneuver, and of course different people will disagree about whether a book happened to pull it off. But if a book fails to pull it off, it really alienates the reader.
Yeah. And I think that if you'd gone into this book understanding that that the payoff was that it was going to like be kind of a silly, quippy romp, you would have rolled your eyes through it a lot, but the ending would not have, had you cringe your balls off, whatever it was you said.
3 times. Yes. And I do apologize for saying it. Cringe my balls off, but that is in fact what I said.
And the other thing is, it is easier to start light and go serious. And maybe we should give this guy props for trying the harder thing, even if he kind of fell down on his face doing it. But part of what Terry Pratchett manages to do is, he keeps the silliness going throughout, but it always, especially in his earlier books, starts off silly, and the serious moments sort of that are interspersed get to dig in deeper and deeper. And I think it's easier to go into something expecting something silly and, find yourself feeling genuine emotions than it is to go into something where you're really sort of you're like politically and conceptually and aesthetically engaged, and then all of that drops into something that's much sillier.
I agree. And I think that unless you have any other notes to make, I think that we may have completed the Dawnhounds. Oh, my last question. Why is this book called The Dawnhounds?
Yeah, I don't know. I really feel like whatever is going on, either this is, this is either a reference we're not getting, entirely possible, or
Was the
this is
pirate
another.
crew the Dawnhounds? Was that mentioned at one point and I just, skimmed
Maybe.
over it?
I don't think so.
No.
The real thing though is that the cover of this book is so different from everything inside the book, and that includes the title.
It's very strange.
Very strange. But I would still say that if you go in forewarned that the ending is going to be extremely silly, and you want some interesting vibes and some cool imagery, that this is worth checking out.
Agreed. So, next time it's I'm checking the ever-changing list, and it looks like it's Slow River by Nicola Griffith.
Yeah, I feel like it's time to do another retro one.
I am looking forward to this because I really enjoyed the last Nicola Griffith book that we read, and also the Nicola Griffith book I read before that. So that'll be a nice change of pace. And
yes.
Join us after that for our 50th episode spectacular.
Oh yeah.
All right. Until then.
All right. Until then, thank
toodaloo.
you. Yes, thank you, and bye.
Bye-bye.